Great, you're live. Take it away.
Awesome. Okay, everyone, very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Some of you, may be experiencing 18th of May, and while the presenters mostly will be experiencing 17th of May today. So it is going to be a very interesting session, and I'm quite excited to join this session. Now over to you, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Vikram. Not much to say for me. I'm just going to turn it over to Peter Broadhurst here, who's head of engineering at Kaleido and maintainer on Hyperledger FireFly, and he'll take us through the introduction.
Thanks so much, Kevin and Vikram. So welcome, everybody. Great to be speaking to you today. The format of today, we're going to have a few slides, about 20 minutes. So not too long, you have to listen to me with the slideware. And we're then going to have a great panel discussion. Please stay tuned for that. And a discussion on some real usage of Firefly. And with then Nicko is going to take us through a live demo of the features of version 1.0, and we'll have time at the end for Q&A. So with that, let me lead off by, before we talk about what's new, what's released, what's part of the V1 delivery, I want to step back and talk about the Firefly project and the problem that it's trying to solve. So hopefully there's lots of developers on the call here today, and maybe some of you are already developing Web3 blockchain applications. Maybe some of you have been tasked with trying to develop your first one. And the reality is it's a complicated task. It's a task that needs a new and different approach to building an application to what you're used to with the traditional Web 2 applications. You've got to choose a blockchain. You've got to work out how to integrate with that blockchain. You've got to think about tokens and how the token economics fit into your use case. You've got to work out how to account for the digital assets that you're going to form a core part of that solution. Think about keys, think about what data can go on the chain, what data can go off of the chain. There's a lot of plumbing before you get to actually building a really interesting application. And a lot of these are the very first challenges you hit. You open your code editor and you're presented with a dizzying array of complex new tools and very hard, low-level problems to solve. And then as you go on through the project, you find that things just get larger. You need to think about, well, how many blockchains am I integrating with? Is it one? Is it multiple? How do I get the level of reliability and scale that I need for a production deployment? How do I build a way to see the history, which the blockchain itself is not able to return to me natively? How to, almost certainly, if you're here interested in Hyperledger projects, you can think about things like security and how an enterprise solution to integrate together. The approach, the Firefly project is there to provide a solution, to provide a stack, to provide a platform that's open, that's pluggable, that is part of one of the leading open source communities within the Linux Foundation, that gives you a starting point that works, a starting point where you have a pattern, a starting point where you can see the shape that your application should be if it needs to be a blockchain application. And you don't need to start with the plumbing. You can start with the business logic. You can apply the pattern and start building your application. This is true for every single other type of application that you build. It's true for all various types of Web3 and enterprise applications in the past. Why is it not true for blockchain? That's really the mission that the Firefly project started off with, was to make a pluggable, easy to use development framework for building enterprise-grade Web3 applications that embrace tokens, that are able to deal with multiple different blockchain platforms. So the journey so far, the project actually, for people like me, actually started about 4 years ago now. Some of the lineage of the code in the project has evolved over that time period. But in June 2021, we actually contributed that code from its original home inside of Kaleido to the Hyperledger open source community. It was about 75,000 lines of code at that time. And in September of 2021, we moved from a lab to a full project inside of the Hyperledger family. Well, we're talking now, just after the v1.0 launch, the community has now extended that original contribution to over 200,000 lines of code. And this is really quite a complete set of features for building Web3 applications. It provides a gateway for connecting to smart contracts across multiple different blockchains, not just blockchains within the Hyperledger stable, but obviously including those. So Hyperledger Besu, but also all other Ethereum blockchains and Hyperledger Fabric as well, all inside of one API front door. It provides a brain, an orchestration engine, we'll talk about that, for the pieces of your application which are about private data that needs to be integrated with the blockchain, as well as those on-chain blockchain smart contracts. A full API for tokens that provides tokens as a first-class API on the platform and knows how to plug in the standards that are in wide adoption across many blockchain networks in production today. As well as the core capabilities of the platform, the version 1 suite, as you'll see, has a lot of features for developers which are beyond just the code. It has a CLI, it has a user experience, it has a way to get yourself running in just a few minutes on your laptop, as you'll see from Nicko later in this session. So let's just talk for a minute about the capabilities that it has. And this architecture with the colored sections called out here shows the features of Firefly, and we call it a supernode. And really, this evolving term in the Web3 space, Firefly is the first open source project trying to tackle the problem of the supernode. And this means it is not itself a blockchain. It is not another DLT. It sits around and above the blockchain. It sits as that middleware tier in between your application code and the blockchains that you're integrating with. And it provides APIs. It provides APIs that allow your application to integrate with any blockchain smart contract. It will generate you an API for that smart contract. It will give your application access to all of the events that are inside of that smart contract. And all blockchains are an event-driven programming paradigm. That's just the way it works in a decentralized system. So giving you access to be able to build these event-driven applications with an easy-to-consume, friendly API. Separate to that, it provides a set of higher-level features for flows, data flows, and business process flows. The way that you can exchange data between parties that needs to be connected to the blockchain, but a lot of the time cannot be on the blockchain itself. In enterprise scenarios, it's common for there to be a 10-to-1 between the amount of data that needs to be out of the blockchain to what's on the blockchain. And that means privacy, it means being able to exchange data individual party to individual party and connect that down to the blockchain, as well as being able to put data into the blockchain itself. And then digital assets is the third major pillar inside of the FireFly SuperNode. This ability to not just be able to have smart contracts that are digital assets, have the audit history of chain of digital assets, have APIs and wallet management and the ability to connect to those digital assets, move them, see the history of them, see the lineage of those digital assets. The way I think about this is that these token constructs, these digital assets, are to blockchain what create, retrieve, update, and delete are to databases. They're the air and water of the system. The blockchain really, without these coding constructs, the blockchain is sort of incomplete. So why are there not APIs that allow you to address those directly? So Firefly provides that in an open and pluggable way. In order to do this, it actually needs a brain with a database to store the private data that you've received, to buffer that, be the audit gateway for that between your application and the blockchain. The blockchain is sort of incomplete. So why are there not APIs? Sorry about that. There's actually a lot of engine room logic that's needed to coordinate all these different streams of information together to make sure that you don't process the private data without processing the blockchain data, to make sure that if you're just connecting directly to the blockchain, you've got rich smart contracts and you want to connect to them, to make sure that you receive every single one of those events, even if your application is offline for a period of time. And then the security controls that you need to be able to integrate with that, and the tooling, and we'll come back to this, that you need as a developer to be able to get started building your applications. So that's what Firefly 1.0 is in a nutshell. I'm going to talk briefly through some of those capabilities in a bit more detail. Here we look at the difference between what you would need to build with or without Firefly. And existing users of Firefly as it's evolved, and you'll hear some of them talking later, have told us that about 80% of the code that they would need to build is provided for them when you start from Firefly. So you need to build 80% less code. Now, that's 80% less boring plumbing code, which gives you all of that time back to focus on what differentiates your application: the business logic, the user experience, the use case, the token economics, the value that you are uniquely providing, rather than building event connectors and low-level blockchain connectivity and wallet management, document transfer, all of these low-level capabilities that on their own are very boring until you've built a use case on top of them. One of the features, as an example, that Firefly provides is your existing smart contracts, whether they're on a Fabric channel, whether they're on an Ethereum sidechain built with Hyperledger Besu or Quorum, whether they're on a public blockchain, that contract has been there for years on public mainnet Ethereum. You're able to point Firefly at the definition of that contract, and it will generate you a reliable and robust API to be able to interact from your application with the methods on that smart contract. So a generator for APIs for any smart contract on the blockchain. And not just in the transaction direction, but also in that event streaming direction. It has a built-in event bus, which is able to track which events you've seen from the blockchain and which you haven't. It will transform them all into friendly JSON payloads and deliver them to you with scale and batching and optimized delivery, but also with reliability. So if your application needs to stop and restart, or it needs to scale, all of those features are built into the event bus so that your application doesn't need to do anything special. It just connects and receives the events it hasn't processed yet. Seems straightforward, but this is so much that would need to be built from scratch if you needed to just start from the raw RPC APIs of the blockchain, because they're so low level on all of the blockchain technologies. And this is a very pluggable interface. So there's a connector framework that allows lots of different blockchains to plug in. And there's actually a lot of work happening at the moment to make that even more friendly to plug in an additional blockchain. And it doesn't need to be an Ethereum derivative. This can be any blockchain technology that can plug in. So there's a lot of innovation going on, actually increasing that catalog to deal with lots of different blockchains. UTXO-based blockchains, think Bitcoin here, could be a connector for this, as well as something like Fabric. That's the level of flexibility built into the application. If we walk up a layer and we talk about flows and we talk about what enterprise business networks look like, a lot of the business-to-business interactions are private and secure. They often are connected to rich on-chain transfers of data, and value of tokens, but the business context is private. It's sensitive. It needs to be coordinated off-chain, and the data needs to flow off-chain, and the interactions with the core enterprise systems, the core system integration, the triggering of business processes, the triggering of sensitive, 20-year-old special secret source logic inside of your enterprise needs to be coupled to the blockchain, but it isn't on the blockchain. So Firefly has 3 separate tiers, which are sort of pluggable layers in the architecture. The blockchain itself, a shared storage layer, which can be IPFS and is also pluggable to all kinds of other shared storage, which is data that doesn't fit on the blockchain itself, but needs to be shared with everybody. And then a private data bus, which can be as simple as the off-the-shelf open source plugin, which is mutual TLS between parties point to point, or sophisticated as a message queuing system that you've built for your business network, completely pluggable. And when we talk about digital assets as this first class construct on the API, that also extends to the data model, the state that's inside of Firefly. And we'll talk a little bit more about how Firefly is really a brain. It has knowledge of the state of the blockchain. It's constantly keeping up to date with that state. So if you point, for example, Firefly at an existing token on public Ethereum, it will index every transaction that's ever happened on that token and build you a fast, rich query database with a very nice experience on the front end with an Explorer that will allow you to explore the history of all of those tokens that existed well before Firefly came along. So to be able to provide that sort of institutional scale front door to integrate with these token economies, to be a gateway between your enterprise and all of this value that is out there, or to allow you to build a new token economy with rich tooling and APIs to model those digital assets, launch them, and interact with them. And I keep on mentioning this brain term, and it really is true. If you look at the core of Firefly, what you'll actually notice is that a lot of the code is in this orchestration. I hope there's lots of technologies out there that this will resonate with. When you think about a technology that we're all familiar with now, like Docker. Docker existed for a period of time, and on its own, it was a very raw tool. And for anybody like me who works with Docker every day, we don't just use Docker, we use an orchestration framework on top of it. We use something like Kubernetes, and others are out there, but Kubernetes came along and provided this orchestration layer that allowed you to manage things at scale, understood the state of that low level, and elevated it by giving you a sort of a brain and orchestration layer on top. That's what Firefly intends to do for the low-level blockchain. By providing this pluggable framework, it's providing that state, that management, that coordination system between the on-chain data, the off-chain data, and the ability to query that, have fast access to it and rich APIs to coordinate with it. So we really do think of it as a stateful brain, not just a gateway to connect. And that means it does manage lots of different types of states. We talked about digital assets, data that you have or haven't transferred to other parties, data that you've received from other parties on the business network, which may not all have come through the blockchain. The blockchain state itself, those blockchain events, the blocks they're in, the transaction hashes, the network state, who are you integrating with? What are their identities? How have they established those identities? Have they proved ownership of tokens? And the data that you have received from those other parties. So that's an overview of Firefly as a whole. And you're going to see some of the rich tooling that comes with it, which will allow you to get going with this really quickly. Now, with no further ado, I think we're gonna stop talking about it, and we're at a high level, and we're going to move to the panel, and you're going to hear from some people who've implemented this directly and the value that it's provided to them. And then we're going to drop down and you're going to see it in action. So I'll stop the share now. And,
Peter, maybe you could share slide 20. Yeah. Oh, could you reload the deck? I have a new slide in there. Yeah. All right, great. That was it.
Thanks, Phil. I'll hand over to you now.
All right. Thanks so much, Peter. Well, I wanted to preface the panel by saying that Kaleido has the privilege to work with thousands of chains and networks, many global blockchain initiatives, and I'm really very honored to introduce our esteemed speakers today. These sets of speakers today represent some of the highest standards of excellence we've seen in their solution approaches, their architectures, and their business results. So we're honored to have Jason Yu, who's the CEO of Tradego, Vinod Sharma, the CTO of Ascendbit, and Kunjab Sharkrit Impat, the head of engineering, platform engineering at Ascendbit. So I'd like to just go with each speaker and ask you if you could share a little bit about yourself and the blockchain initiatives you're leading, and perhaps we can start in the same order. Jason, if you'd like to go first.
Okay. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for inviting me to join the meeting. It's my honor, it's a big honor. My name is Jason Yu. I'm CEO of Tradego. Before I found Tradego, I have worked for Sunnycam for almost 10 years as the head of the risk management team from 2008 to 2017. From 2017 to 2019, I found the first crude oil trading platform in China. The name is crudeoil.com. But unfortunately, it failed. Also, I have got a lot of lessons from that failure, especially from the commodity trading e-commerce platform, from different angles like business, technology, and regulations. Therefore, from 2019, I started the Tradego project, and after 2 years, very tough paperwork, the company kicked off officially this January 1st. Our main product is to digitize the core trading documentation, which will help the participants to enhance their whole trading process, clear title, protect the user data physically based on blockchain. And also we can bridge the asset and the capital with a very high quality. We work with Kaleido team closely in the past 1.5 years. I believe Kaleido is a very reliable team. And also I believe Firefly is a very great start, a great project, and will be a star project in the future. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Jason. Maybe next, Vinod, if you would like to go next. Just if you could share a little bit about yourself and then the blockchain initiatives that you're leading.
Thank you, Sophia. Thanks for inviting, and sincerely thanks to you as well as the entire Kaleido team for the wonderful support you guys have always been giving us. So myself, Vinod, I'm actually working as a CTO for Ascendbit company. Ascendbit company is a 100% owned company by CP Group. And it's under the conglomerate, which is probably the largest in entire Southeast Asia. And in some matters, it is actually the largest at the global level. So for the CP Group, we have launched or planning to launch, sorry, quite a number of initiatives under supply chain as well as our own cryptocurrency. So we have those plans going on. And we've been using Kaleido, the platforms, plus especially around the Hyperledger FireFly. So I think I'll speak about that later on. But on my little bit of background, before coming to Thailand, I was based out of Africa, where I've seen probably the blend of technologies. On one extreme, it is quite outdated. On the other hand, it's quite advanced. So I don't know, but normally people think when they talk about Africa, they think it's quite outdated. But I've lived there for 8 years, so I can tell you it's not the case. But now in Thailand, I have a team of about 700 engineers. So my engineering team is about 700 people. And the focus is now shifting from the traditional technologies to the blockchain, which is, I think, we are on a progressive track. And the projects which we are through, I'm not sure how many people are aware of the True Money brand, which is the largest the payments, mobile payments and mobile money systems in South Asia. And it was the first unicorn in Thailand last year. So that's the initiatives which we are doing. And now we want to do the similar trend into our new startup, SNBit. I hope we will be succeeding the same way as we have succeeded in the previous ventures. Thanks, Sophia, for the time.
Thank you, Vinod. So very, very impressive from our first two speakers. And Kunjab, would you like to share a little bit about yourself and I guess some of your work with blockchain?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to join the panel discussion. So I have some background on the open source project. Before I joined SNBit company, I worked in Agoda, which is one of the biggest hotel reservation in Asia. And I worked with the open source project called OpenStack. Yeah, in 10 years at Agoda, we grew like 10,000%. Yeah, and the infrastructure, I can see the generation evolution from the legacy data center move to private cloud. With using open source community, I can join the community, I can learn from the community, and I also sharing back to the community. And after I moved to the True Money CP group, as I working with Vinod, I work to transform the legacy data center into the hybrid cloud data center. So I see the generation of transformation. And now I'm focusing on the SNBit company. So I see the transition of legacy infrastructure to the new blockchain infrastructure with help of the open source project from FireFly and from the Hyperledger Foundation, make me very confident to build it for the enterprise. Yeah. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Kunjab. I think a follow-on question for Vinod is some thoughts, I think bridging on the open source thoughts that Kunjab shared. I know you've run many projects with hundreds of engineers in different capacities around the world. Can you share some thoughts on the trade-offs when you're building for writing custom code that's proprietary or working with consultants or different types of integrators versus working with a large open source project like FireFly?
Okay, thanks, Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's a huge difference on such kind of projects when you work with consultants whose focus is actually always slightly different from as a customer what your focus is. But when you try to do something which you want to build yourself, you want to put your hands dirty and then an experience on the technology with the help of the open source. I think that gives us a lot of advantage and exposure to the real experience. So that's what we say normally in my team. I mean, Kunjab was aware and the entire team. So we normally say that get real, get life, or that's how we be. So we don't want to live in an artificial life. We all have NI, so we believe in natural intelligence rather than being an AI part. But anyways, not going to that direction. So now coming back, so of course the open source technologies always helps you in a far more better compared to the proprietaries, because the proprietary technology is what I believe, in my experience, not only here and from my entire experience from the last 17 years, I think the one element which differentiate the proprietary and the open source technology is always gets built with the idea in the mind to help and allow others to grow along with that technology grows. But the proprietary is always have the business and the commercial angle. So I think that's what it is a key differentiator, because even I use the proprietary software, it has licensing and all those things. Now, the time to market, because when you use the open source technology, it always helps you to bring the things which you want to bring to the market in a much faster and easier way compared to the proprietary, because you are dependent upon someone who has to guide you step by step. And in my words, personally, in my field, is like a spoon feeding. So I think proprietary technologies, and that's another difference between proprietary and the open source. And of course, when you talk about the adoption of best practices, the cost, the extensibility, the scalability, and the flexibility is much more higher in the open source compared to the proprietary. But looking at what you want to build in terms of the what your customer needs, so you really focus on your goals rather than keep worrying about, oh, if I use this much, I have to pay this much. If I use this much, I have to pay this much. So that fear that the cost gets away, because you're trying to introduce something to the market where you want to try before you get confident, yes, it will be success or not success. And I think that's where the open source really helps you. And when you again work with the open source, it always helps to create your network much bigger and much faster. And that's another personal experience, because we I may not be able to disclose, but we are working on a certain project where we really need, and blockchain, of course, we all know is it's not a technology which you can do it just alone sitting in your own R&D center. You really need other participants. So from that perspective, I think in our projects which we are doing, it's really helping us to come up with that concept where we are able to collaborate and share what we can share and ask the others to join, which is actually helping us, not only us, but the partners as well, to try and test and then realize our dreams, what we want to do. So I think those are the few things which I can mention.
Okay,
And,
thank you, Vinod.
Yeah, thank you.
I think bridging on a comment you made with the fact that there's multiple parties involved and this is decentralized, was wondering, Jason, as CEO of one of the world's newest and fastest moving trade finance initiatives, how do you look at FireFly in terms of enabling speed to market and helping you work with decentralized network with companies that sometimes are collaborators and sometimes could be competitors? So if there's any considerations or thoughts you have there.
Okay, thank you, Sophia. I'm not an IT professor, and also Tradego is not an IT company. So most of my reason is from I think from business perspective. I think the reason for us to choose an open source solution is very simple. Because Tradego business is focused on international trading scenario, and so far the beginning scenario, most of them are importing to China. So the clients we face every day, like bank, trading company, and shipping company, and other type company, half of them are from a different country, and half of them are from domestic China. So I think if we choose any kind of technology that's supported by or controlled by a company from a single country, I think maybe it's kind of disaster for us, because our clients, especially in commodity trading industry, always prefer the technology that support is from their own country. I know. Maybe sometimes from technology side, it's ridiculous maybe, but it just happens every day, frequently. Our clients are always ask us to find a solution that's supported from their local country. So I think I remember I also discussed this situation with Steve and Sophia last year when the Firefly 1.0 is under the preparation last year. I think the result for us is very clear. The only solution is open source. So the answer left to me is very clear. Ask my CTO to find a cheap and fast open source framework. I believe Firefly is one of them. But that's my answer, Sophia.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And I wonder if Vinod, you had something to add, and then Sharkrit, Kunjab, I think you had a diagram you wanted to share as well, just to show a little more details technically on how you're leveraging Firefly. So Vinod, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sorry, I just thought of adding this very specific example and specific experience we have still going through, very closely related to the Firefly. So I'm sure a lot of people in Southeast Asia are aware of that. In Europe, we got GDPR, similar thing. In Thailand, we got the PDPA, which is the Personal Data Protection Act. Mm-hmm. So in order to now meet that, so when it came in, we were not sure how this will impact our projects. But slowly, gradually, and as and when the chapters started unfolding, we started realizing that a lot of projects and what we were doing were supposed to be undone, unlearn, and then redo and relearn. So if we would have done what we thought that we have to unlearn and undone and then start relearn and redone, I think would have taken a very long and probably not the time, but as well as the cost and efforts as well. But the Firefly really came in as a rescuer for us to support, so I can meet the PDPA requirements as well as support and help the business not to go beyond certain level of changes.
Yeah.
So for example, a very specific example, like right to be forgotten. So now if you write the data on blockchain, if you build the profile on blockchain, you have the entire, my name, my address, everything is sitting on blockchain. Now, imagine the customer calls in the call center, hey, I want you to be forgotten, to forget me. It's very simple for the customer to call and say that, but how difficult or how easy or how tedious it is for me as a backend person to make sure that I comply, because customer is just trying to avail the law which is there in the country. So I think that's where we saw that Firefly can really help us to see what goes on chain, what goes off chain, how to combine the two together, link together, so that we can make sure that the PDPA law has been followed, and how we make sure that what goes on chain in terms of, for example, it goes only the hash, and then the data remains off chain, how to link the chain data and the off chain data. So that way the privacy and the protection and the blockchain underlying features, the immutability remains intact. So I think, let me say that again, the Firefly really came in as a rescuer to shorten that process of unlearn, undone, and then redo and relearn. So thank you so much for introducing this wonderful and amazing tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod. I think that's a very practical example with business implications, leveraging best practices in the technology and illustrating a second generation of building blockchain projects that builds on a lot of some of the mistakes in the first generation of building. So now you can move faster, more compliant, more cost effective. I think just to close out, was there something you wanted to share, Kunjab? I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about, oh yeah, okay. And you're on mute.
Kunjab, you're mute.
Okay. Okay. So as Sandbit platform, we're focusing to build a blockchain digital platform. And we're focusing to build as the two big platform, which is the digital asset platform and the trust assessment platform. For the, we can call as DApp and TAP. On the DApp, we build for digital asset tracking, focus on build well that we can keep tracking the tangible asset, also intangible asset that leverage the Ethereum compatible blockchain with the open source Quorum and Hyperledger Besu. On the trust assessment platform, we use for proof the authenticity of the data that we can measure trust, and we can regulate on the Hyperledger fabric, underlying technology. And in the middle, we think the interoperability layer is very important. So we build a blockchain integration service, the tooling that working with the Hyperledger FireFly, that to ensure that we comply the privacy, security, and the compliance. As Vinod mentioned, we have the law and regulation, the PDPA, to be compliant in Thailand. So we need to focus on this one. And in the large enterprise, the interoperability for enterprise is very important for build cross-domain and also how to the data flow on off-chain and data chain integration. This is very important. Could we not, would you like to share additional thought on this?
No, thanks, Kunjab. I think you already shared, but I just wanted to give a word of caution that these jargons, DApp and TAP, or the way we break down blockchain, probably this is our own kind of analogy that how we break down the blockchain. So it may not resonate with the rest of the world, but this is very much resonate and very much helpful in case of a Sandbit, that if you really want to break down the blockchain, this is the way we break down, and we coordinate and organize our team and our systems. Thank you. But blockchain or probably a Kaleido systems or a Firefly, I think it's a wonderful, it really doesn't matter. We are on TAP or Ethereum or FAP. So it's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vinod. I think multi-protocol flexibility and choice, those are all very important things we hear across many use cases. And I think really, we feel very privileged to have you all, Jason, Vinod, and Kunjab. It's always helpful for people to hear about the use cases, how people are using the technology, the rationale, and the results they're getting. So thanks so much. And we're going to transition now to a live demo, and you'll get to see the technology in action. And it has some amazing user interfaces and experiences. So I think you'll like what you're going to see. So handing it over to Nicko. And thanks again to our three esteemed guests and panelists.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you, Sophia.
All right, thank you, Sophia. Hello, everyone. I am Nicko Guyer, and I'm excited to be able to show you Firefly today. Before we jump into the demo, I have just a couple of slides just to kind of set the context for what we're going to be looking at in the demo, so we kind of know what we're looking at as we are looking at it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully you can see my slides. Oh, Nobody's complaining. Okay, great. All right, so just want to start off briefly with talking about what we're going to see. When we built Firefly, we wanted to create a really easy to use developer experience. We wanted it to be quick and easy for people to get started with. We wanted the experience to be powerful enough to meet the needs of experienced Web3 developers, but also kind of help people get started who maybe this is their very first Web3 project. We wanted it to use tools that felt familiar. And we also wanted it to be able to run everything offline on a laptop. Even if you are on an airplane, you can work on building an app against Firefly's API completely offline once you've downloaded everything ahead of time. So that's the developer experience that we're going to see. So here's what we're going to run today. I'm going to run the Firefly CLI, and I'm going to create a local developer environment on my machine. This is using all open source tools. These are all, you can find the source code for all these tools in the Hyperledger FireFly Git repos. So that the CLI behind the scenes will use Docker Compose to run all of the components of a supernode right on my laptop. So what does that look like? Here's a little picture. This is a picture of 2 different supernodes that we're going to be running. I'm actually going to be running 3. I didn't show the third one here just for the sake of space. But within our supernode, there is a Firefly Core, and this is the brain that Peter was talking about earlier. This is the orchestration engine that, and it also provides the API layer, and it also hosts the web UI layer that we'll be looking at as well. The Firefly Core talks to a lot of different systems. Each of these is going to be running in a different Docker container on my machine, including a database, a data exchange, a blockchain node, a tokens connector, and a variety of other things. Outside the supernode, we are also going to be running an application called the Firefly Sandbox for each member of this Firefly network that we're going to be building here. The Firefly Sandbox you can think of as an application, an end user application that's written to use Firefly's API. So it's both an example of how you can build an app, and it also provides code snippets that you can use to copy and paste into a backend application using the Firefly SDK to build your own app. Okay, so this is kind of the topology of what we're going to look at. So I'm going to be running Firefly in what we describe as a sort of a multi-party network or multi-party mode, where there are multiple Firefly nodes. You could think of each of these as being run by a different organization in a network. So we're going to look at the Firefly dashboard and the Firefly Sandbox. Those are screenshots of them, but even better than a screenshot is actually seeing the real thing. So let's hop over to my other desktop here. This is the Firefly Explorer or the Firefly UI. This is a web front end that is being hosted by Firefly Core, and it's sort of an inspector, a view into the system. So in here, we can see a network map. We can see I have 3 members and I've labeled them red, green, and blue. So here's the red member. And this is I also have 3 different Chrome browsers open here, a red browser, a green browser, and a blue browser, just so we can visually compare. So here's our network map. Right now, I haven't run any transactions on this network. So that's why you're seeing no activity. But let's do some transactions now. I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to open the Firefly Sandbox. Actually, before I do that, what I didn't show you is that before I started sharing my screen on my other desktop here, I've run the Firefly CLI and I've started a network of 3 members, and it prints the URLs for the web UI and for the sandbox for each of these members. And those are the URLs that I opened in my browser. Separately, I've also deployed an ERC20 and an ERC721 contract to this chain. On the right-hand side of my screen, you can see the Solidity source for the ERC20 contract. It extends an OpenZeppelin ERC20 contract, and it adds just a little bit of custom functionality on top of that to be able to mint and transfer tokens with data. So we'll come back to this in just a little bit. But what I want to show you first is the Firefly Sandbox. So like I said, this is both an example end user application that and also shows you kind of how to build each of the different things that you can do with Firefly into your own application. So on the left-hand side here, we have kind of a form that we can fill out. And across the top, we have these 3 tabs. And these are really the three major buckets of features that are in Firefly 1.0. Sort of the things that provide the functionality, those three pillars that Peter talked about, apps, flows, and digital assets. These can be grouped into these three categories here. So what I want to start with is custom contracts, because that's the thing that people oftentimes think of first when they think of, hey, I want to build a blockchain application. Oh, I need a custom smart contract. How am I going to do that? So, excuse me, for this example, we're going to use this. We're going to use a custom ERC20 contract, the one that I just showed you a minute ago. But this could be any custom smart contract. It doesn't have to necessarily be an ERC20. It could be something entirely different. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to define a contract interface. A contract interface in Firefly is a way to describe a custom smart contract or any smart contract in a blockchain generic way. So it encapsulates important specific blockchain information, but it also describes the entire contract in a way that Firefly, I could describe both a Solidity contract or a Fabric chain code using a Firefly interface. So for blockchains that have a built-in format to describe, excuse me, to describe smart contracts, their events, their functions, their parameters, and all the type information, such as Ethereum's ABI format, there is an API built into Firefly to automatically do this conversion for you. So if you have the ABI for your contract, you can actually copy that right into the Firefly Sandbox, which is what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to pick ABI Solidity Application Binary Interface. I'm going to go back over to my source code. And after I've compiled the contract, I get a JSON output. And I'm just going to copy the ABI here. It's long. And I'm just going to paste that right here. I'm going to give this contract interface a name. We'll call this just ERC20 with data. And we'll say this is version 1.0. And I'm going to run this. What happens when I run this? We'll see off on the right-hand side, there are some things going on. So, but before we look at the events, immediately we get back a 202 accepted. We get an ID here that we can use to track that request through the system. So Firefly has a very asynchronous programming model that's event-driven. And so when you submit things to the system, if it is accepted into the system, you'll get a 202 and an ID back. And then the general pattern is that you either have a WebSocket or webhooks that are listening for events coming out of Firefly. So in this case, we've received some events. Those events indicate that we have broadcasted this Firefly interface to all of the other members of the system. And so what this means is now we can go into our dashboard. I can reload this and we'll see that there was a batch pin transaction that happened. Let's go look at the in off-chain, we can look at data and we can see there was a definition that was created here. And this is the definition of my smart contract that I just uploaded. Well, that's great. We submitted it, so it's appearing in our dashboard. But because it was broadcasted to all the other members of the network, I could hop over to the blue node as well. And I could look at the off-chain data tab here, and I could see the same definition. So when we create a definition in a Firefly network, it's a way of defining a piece of data or defining some sort of structure that all of the members of the network should know about. In this case, it's this contract that all of these members will be interacting with here shortly. So that's great. Now, how do we actually use our contract? So the next step is to build an API endpoint for it. So to do that, we're going to register a contract API. We're going to select the contract interface that we just created here. And I'm going to call this ERC20. And then I need to give it the contract address. So I'm going to go back over to my terminal where I deployed this earlier and just copy the contract address. I'm going to paste this here and run that. This will also get broadcasted. As we can see, we received an event that the message was confirmed. And now what this has done is this has built an API endpoint that we can use to interact with our smart contract. In addition to just creating endpoints, it's also created full OpenAPI 3 spec and a Swagger UI that we can open, and we can interact with our contract right here in our browser. So let's mint some tokens now. I can invoke methods on the contract. So I can invoke mint with data. I can click try it out. let's mint 1,000. We can send some data with it because this is our custom mint with data function. I don't need to send any particular data right now, so I'm just going to use a null hex string. And then I need to provide the to address. This is the Ethereum address that I want to mint these tokens to. I'm going to mint them to myself for now. So to find my Ethereum address for the red node, I'm going to go back to the Firefly Explorer, and I'm going to look at the network. Under organizations in the network, I can see the list, and I can see this is my org or your org. That's what it says. I'm going to click here, and then under the verifiers section, there's an Ethereum address, and this is the address of the wallet for the signing key for the red node in the network. I'm going to go back to the to my Swagger UI and paste that here, and I'm going to click execute. So immediately we get a 202 back, and what I'm also going to do now is we're also interested in when tokens are transferred on the network, it would be great to receive events for those as well. We can see on our Swagger that there are listener endpoints as well to set up a listener to tell Firefly that these are important blockchain events to listen to, and I would like you to notify my application when you receive them. We can do that right through the sandbox. So we're going to create an event listener or a contract listener for my ERC20 contract on the transfer event here, and then we'll send this to a topic called sandbox. I'll run that. Okay, so we've created that, and now I'm going to go check just to make sure we have some balance in there. I'm going to do a query now. This is a read-only operation. Click try it out. I'm going to paste again my address here, and we should see we have 1,000. Yep, we do. Okay, great. So let's do a transfer real quick, and we should see that event come in. So we're going to go back up here we're going to invoke, because this will perform a blockchain transaction. Try it out. Let's send 100, and let's get the address of the green node this time. So again, we'll go back to the dashboard, look under organizations, and under the verifiers, we'll get the Ethereum address of the green node, and we'll paste that here. Okay, we get a 202 back. Let's go check the balance of the green node now. So we'll scroll back down here to query the balance of it. Let's check our own balance first, just to make sure. Yep, so now we only have 900. And we'll check the green node, and the green node has 100. Okay, well, that's great. Let's take a peek back at the sandbox. We see that while we were doing that, we received some blockchain events. And that was because we set up that contract listener. We can start receiving events from this custom smart contract as well. Let's go take a look at the Firefly Explorer and see what was going on inside Firefly while we were doing all these things. So we can look at the blockchain dashboard. We can see that there were several batch pin events from broadcasting the contract and the API. We can also see that there were 2 transfers here as well. One was actually the mint, because mint actually just does a transfer behind the scenes. And the other was the transfer of the 100 tokens to the other node. And we can click on it and see the output. See it was from this address to this address, and we transferred 100. So that's great. I realize I'm running out of time here, so I'm gonna try to speed things up here a little bit. But this is the sort of the kind of the building blocks of being able to work with custom smart contract logic with Firefly and just really developer-friendly APIs. Now, as Peter was talking about earlier, hypothetically, what if this was a token contract that's been on chain, on a public chain, as an example, for maybe even years, and there's been a lot of transactions on there, and we want to build a history of what has already happened on this chain. That's where the Firefly token connector comes into play, and that's where the concept of a Firefly token pool is used. So to do that, even though this contract has only existed for about 5 minutes, and we've only had 2 transactions on it, we're going to use this as a hypothetical example here. So let's create a new token pool. We'll call this FFC for Firefly coin. We'll give the symbol as FFC. This needs to match what was in the smart contract when it was deployed, and I deployed it as FFC. It is a fungible token. We could also select non-fungible if we wanted to reference our ERC 721 contract. But I'm going to go back here and grab the contract address of my deployed ERC20, and I'm going to paste that here, and I'm going to run that. Now, what we'll see is we created a token pool, and then a bunch of other things came in. And what that was the token pool, the token connector was talking to the blockchain, and it began indexing all the transactions that were already on chain. So now if we go back and look at our Explorer, we can go to the tokens tab here. Under the tokens section, we can look at the dashboard. And now this is a brand new page that's just lit up because we've created this token pool. We can see account balances for everyone that has a balance on here. And you'll notice that there's a lot of zeros here. That's because our contract, if you're familiar with the ERC20, has the concept of decimals. And so this lets people work with fractional tokens, even though the Ethereum EVM only supports integers. So that's what we're seeing there. Likewise, the Firefly Sandbox also provides ways to mint and transfer right here, right in the Sandbox UI. So you could go straight to here, and you don't have to actually interact directly with the Swagger if you wanted to. I just wanted to show that sort of building up from a custom smart contract all the way to these rich tokens APIs now. So let's mint 100. Now, again, this is going to be 100 times 18, just because of the way this is represented in the user interface. So I'm going to run that. And then I'll demonstrate a transfer now to, let's see, I think we transferred to green last time. Let's transfer some to blue because he doesn't have any. And we could optionally attach a message to this as well. For the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of scoot through this here a little bit. And then finally, let's burn one just so we can see what that looks like in the dashboard. So I ran several different token transactions there. Let's hop back over to the Explorer and refresh. Now we can see our new account balance has been reflected immediately here, and we can see the other transfer. We can see who it was from, to, the signing key that was used, the actual data from the event, and here's our burn as well. So some amazing things just make it super easy to do stuff with tokens. I don't have time to also show non-fungible tokens, but you could do all of the same things with non-fungible tokens as well through here. And it's really powerful, really easy, quick to get up and started. The last thing that I want to touch on just real quick, and then we'll do some Q&A, is messaging. Messaging is a foundational component in Firefly. It's a very foundational component in building distributed applications. I have data on one system that I need to send to another party or to another system. That could be a simple string. It could be a JSON object. It could be a JSON object that conforms to a certain JSON schema that I've defined that represents an important type that members of the multi-party network have agreed upon. And it could actually just be a file as well. I could click here and I could upload a file directly to here. So for this, I'll just send a string. So this is going to be a broadcast message. Just like when I was broadcasting the Firefly interface, this is just going to broadcast a string to everyone. So I'll run this. I'll wait for my batch pin to be confirmed here. And then let's go take a look at the blue node here. We should see under off-chain data, which is where we're at already, actually. I can click here, and here is a message. Let's take a look at the green node and look at off-chain data as well. And here is the message as well. So in these cases, as someone mentioned in the chat earlier, yes, there is a blockchain transaction, and the payload of the message is hashed, and it's pinned to the blockchain. The actual payload remains off-chain. It remains in a shared storage mechanism. And this is what that we're seeing here. This is why the data is under the off-chain tab here. Likewise, we can also send private messages as well. So under private messaging, we could send one just to green. We'll say this is a secret message to green. We'll run that. We should be able to see this in our own dashboard. Let's go look at off-chain data. Indeed, there's our secret message we sent to green. We should be able to see it in green's dashboard. There it is. But if we go back and look at blue's dashboard, we'll notice that the blue node does not see that message at all. So that's just a really quick snapshot of messaging. Messaging is really important. There's a lot of different features in it as well. I don't have time to go into all of them, but hopefully this was just a very quick taste of some of the things that you can do with Firefly and gives you an idea of how you can get up and started with it. There are guides in the documentation that will walk you through using a Firefly CLI, installing a Firefly CLI, using it to set up this same environment that I just built, running the Firefly Sandbox, and begin walking you through each of the three sections of messages, tokens, and contracts. So thank you all very much for watching and listening. I hope this was informative, and I can't wait to see what you will build with Firefly. Thank you very much. And I'll turn it back over to, I guess, to Q&A at this point.
Do we just talk, or is there a mechanism for raising our hand?
Yeah, I was wondering the same.
Kevin?
Yeah, Paul, take it away.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for the presentation. It's very helpful, and I'm very excited about it. I've actually been exploring Firefly for some months at this point, so I continue to be very excited about it. To get to the question, so there's been some discussion about the multi-chain reality of the future, and I certainly agree with that. It's becoming very central very quickly to the work that I do. My understanding at the moment is that Firefly, when you stand up a supernode, you stand up a supernode binding to a single chain at the moment. That chain can be one of the several that have been named here. Are there plans? First of all, is that still correct? Secondly, if so, are there plans to extend Firefly to do simultaneous cross-chain flows, meaning that you could point it at a Besu instance, a Fabric instance, a Corda instance, all in the same Firefly supernode? And then thirdly, with respect to privacy, is there now, or are there plans to integrate support for some of the zero knowledge proof based flows and interactions generally that that would facilitate this kind of not just cross-chain, but sophisticated privacy enhancing or privacy retaining even interactions that are not possible without zero knowledge proof technology?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. That was, I think, 3 questions, which is about the limit of what I can remember all at one time, but I'll take a stab at the first 2. The first was, does Firefly currently connect to a single blockchain? As of Firefly 1.0, what I was demonstrating was all of the messaging and orchestration, primarily messaging, does happen on a blockchain. But like you said, that could be, it is pluggable. So it could be Fabric, it could be Ethereum, and that Ethereum could be Go Ethereum, it could be Besu. It is pluggable. That you could use additional chains through the token connectors today. So that's kind of the state of Firefly 1.0 today. There is a lot of work going on actively in the code base right now in the Firefly community to allow connections to multiple chains for various for different purposes, including public chains as well. Peter, I don't know if you want to add on anything to that, and also that I don't know if you want to take a stab at the third question there, which was about zero knowledge proofs.
Yeah, great questions, Paul. So as Nicko said, there's actually been a lot of development that's been going on in the next release branch of Firefly. And there are 3 current active streams. One is updating the support for all of those variety of different chains, the architectures to support them with a new set of components, a transaction manager, which is able to deal with all of those complexities of gas management with a policy-driven approach to really help it scale to the variety of different public chains out there, and a connector framework. That's thread number 1. I'm really personally involved in that one. Second thread that's happening is, as Nicko said, the ability to have multiple blockchains connected to one Firefly. That's in flight at the moment. But also to be able to have 2 modes to run Firefly in. And one Firefly can actually work in both of these modes in different namespaces. A mode where all of the members of the business network are using Firefly, and they're using those high-level features of Firefly to connect. And a mode where it's my gateway as an organization to blockchains, and those blockchains, there are all kinds of users on there who are not using Firefly. So that switch between sort of gateway mode and multi-party mode is going in at the moment. And there's a third stream as well around some advanced API security features being added in, and all of those are active and running at the moment. So please do come along to the monthly community calls to get engaged with those threads directly, and reach out on Discord for some more information. On the zero knowledge proofs, that's probably one to take offline. Hundreds of thoughts to share with you there. Very much a plug point for Firefly that we, the tokens connector in particular is a great place to plug that in. Jim, who's on the line, and I have had lots of conversations about the projects that could plug in there. There is not one on the shelf in the open source community that you can use as a plug point today, but there's been a lot of thinking and a lot of experimentation in that space.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
Vinod has raised hand. Vinod.
Hi, everyone. And let me turn on my video also. So the question is regarding the blockchain journey. Like, I'm from Java background originally, working in cloud computing lately, like total 14 years. So I'm learning Solidity now, and I explored Hyperledger Fabric and other things, Sawtooth a bit, primarily Solidity. So now Firefly looks interesting, but what's the right way to consume this? Because I'm trying to build a practice on blockchain, and there are so many different things here and there. So what do you suggest? It's just a new buy kind of question. Sorry about that.
It's a great question. I wonder, Nicko, did you want to take the first stab at this one?
Sure. Yeah. So, Firefly is like we talked about earlier, the developer experience the goal is to make it really easy to get started with it. So there's a lot that you can do just out of the box. It's very easy to install the Firefly CLI. It's very easy to set up the very same thing that I just demoed here today. And so we've seen a lot of people in the community coming to blockchain. They're new to blockchain, or they're new to Web3, and Firefly is sort of we talk about it being a Web3 gateway as a component in an architectural stack, but in a lot of ways it's a developer's gateway into their first experience with building a Web3 app as well. So Firefly is not a blockchain. It's not a distributed ledger technology, but it provides a layer on top of the DLT. It provides a layer on top of distributed storage and a bunch of other pretty complicated topics that present a very easy to use API. And so hopefully you're able to see that from the demo. But yeah, it is a great place to come to learn, to just try, like, hey, I want to learn about ERC20, or I want to learn about ERC 1155. And there's very easy ways to just play with those technologies right on your laptop with Firefly and the Firefly CLI.
Just to add one thing, I would encourage everybody who's looking to get into blockchain. There isn't a bad place to start. One particularly good place to start is to try out tokens. They're just such a ubiquitous, it's so core to sort of a value that you can get from blockchain. It's so hard to build in anything else. And you can really learn about what blockchain can do with them. And because they're so well adopted, there's great standards out there. And a project like Firefly has pre-built connectors for a whole bunch of standards, ERC20, ERC721, ERC1155. So you don't have to start in Solidity. You can start by trying out what the contract does out the box, and then you can try extending the Solidity a little bit. You don't have to start from scratch. So that's a really good tip for anybody who's looking to get into blockchain for the first time.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
Thank you both. And one related question is like, I was recently developing a D app and which talks to Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com is a cloud computing PaaS platform. So I was trying to use Ether.js to connect it via JavaScript, but with the Firefly, I see there's a way to expose APIs, which maybe can be consumed with a backend system, like which is not dependent on MetaMask. So is that the right direction to think about like a Firefly use case? Like it's not just web, maybe beyond that and for backend servers also?
Music to our ears. I come from an integration background, so you're speaking my language, and being able to sort of point non-blockchain technologies at something that looks the way that they understand the world, predictable APIs, predictable events. You know, maybe you've got an enterprise service bus and it's like you need something you can connect that to. Firefly speaks that language on one side and it speaks blockchain on the other. So you should find it a really great toolkit to build something like a Salesforce connector in there.
Thank you. And last question is, how tough is it to go live on production with Firefly? I saw the sample nodes via CLI. Do you have ready-made paths and templates to go live?
Yes, so there are partners in the Firefly ecosystem, and you know, hands up, I happen to work for one of them, which are providing production-ready solutions off the shelf. Also in the community, there are, as well as the CLI, which gets you like a live running environment on your laptop or on a shared VM, there's also a whole set of Kubernetes Helm templates, which are a deployment templating system on top of Kubernetes with a load of documentation. So if you're looking to build you know, a deployment yourself and you've got a DevOps specialist around, then there's stuff speaking their language of Kubernetes and Helm that they can go to get started.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we probably have time for one more question if there's any out there.
Yeah, one question from me. So we saw that, you know, we could convert, you know, Solidity smart contract API into, you know, your APIs, right? And it was a beautiful way to do it. And, you know, it actually saves everyone a lot of time. So is the similar thing available for Fabric smart contracts, maybe for Go?
There is. I wonder if Jim's on. Maybe Jim wanted to chime in here and talk about what we've done for Fabric.
Yeah, absolutely. This is Jim, one of the maintainers on Firefly as well. Yeah, so with different blockchain technologies, you have different language choices for building your smart contract. Solidity specifically is for the EVM-based ecosystems, Ethereum, and many derivatives of Ethereum. If you want to use Golang, you can try out Hyperledger Fabric instead, which Firefly also supports. In fact, you can use Nicko's CLI to provision a full Fabric network and build Firefly components on top of it, just on your laptop. You just need to provide the Fabric as the blockchain provider, and there you can use Golang, Node.js, or even Java to build your smart contracts.
And just to add to what Jim said, because Fabric doesn't have a definition format for what inputs look like to a smart contract function, you do craft, sort of Firefly's adding that value to Fabric directly. There isn't one underneath it. Fabric just, it's bytes is the input for an individual function. But you can use it to say, actually, my Go smart contract expects a JSON payload for the first parameter with these parameters. And it's not a lot of work to craft that from scratch. So you can, as a developer of a smart contract in Fabric, you can now advertise that to others with a REST API with a little bit of work, you know, to define the interface. And then everybody else can consume your smart contract without learning Fabric.
Sure, thanks. So it would help, you know, if there is a link where, you know, probably, you know, a past, you know, presentation that you guys might have done. So that would help to look at that, or probably we can organize a new one, a new session.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion for a community session, just running through a fabric sample end to end. I know, Jim, you'd been updating the docs recently for that.
Yeah, absolutely. The steps that Peter was talking about to teach a fabric, to teach Firefly about a fabric contract, the documentation is being reviewed and it should appear in the next couple of days.
Great, many thanks.
For what it's worth, Fabric, by virtue of at least potentially communicating with chain code via gRPC, could potentially take advantage of gRPC's server reflection service or server reflection APIs, which support dynamic querying and invocation of gRPC functions, RPC calls, or streaming by reflection at runtime.
That's a great point, Paul. Jim and I were talking about providing protobuf definitions in addition to JSON.
Yeah, if you can invoke proto-C on the fly, also at runtime, that might also work if you can dynamically link the results. I think you can do that in some languages, but not others. That would be the concern that I would have about that approach. I would look at server reflection closely, but of course that then is up to the chain code developer. That's not something that Fabric can enforce or Firefly can enforce.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's an option we'd like to provide, so that you can use the JSON payload, but underneath it can be bytes that are comparable to a protobuf definition. That's definitely something we'd like to add in the future. Great suggestion, Paul.
Thanks. As you can imagine, I've been looking at all this fairly closely.
It's great to have you in the community, Paul, and everybody on the call. I know we've probably run out of time for questions here, but do jump on the Discord, engage with us, get involved. Friendly bunch. There's lots of people there keen to help and chat through what you're trying to achieve and help there.
Absolutely. Thanks again, everybody, for the great discussion and presentation.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks everyone. Thank you to Vikram and Hyperledger India for hosting this event. And thank you to all our panelists. It was great hearing your insights. And thanks to everyone who took the time to join today. So like Peter said, we look forward to seeing you in the community here. So have a good rest of your morning or afternoon, or wherever you are time zone wise. Thanks.
Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a very good day or a good night to you in the US.
Thank you.
Thank you.